this is Bari of Anglesey again, back with another spear video. This one I'm going to go over several things that are actually covered in other videos that I've already put out there. Mainly, probably the two most significant ones are the 50 spear tips, and then I also have 20 more spear tips. So there I've got 70 actual ideas on spearing, but those go through very quickly. This one was sort of inspired by a question from a new spear person this weekend. Wanted me to just kind of give him a where do I start and what do I do, how do I use this thing. So that sort of inspired this video. Pretty much everything I cover here is going to be not just correct for beginner spears, but it's something that I apply to my own spearing after 20-something years of experience. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is defense. I'm going to focus a lot of time on defense here, and I really want to emphasize the value of being a very good defensive spearman. So one of the things that happens in a lot of battles with spear, particularly anything that's a static line battle, a bridge battle, maybe pieces of a woods battle, any sort of pass battle, and one of the things that happens a lot of times when you get a really experienced spearman out there is the only thing that's stopping that spearman from just murdering the other side is the other side having at least one spearman still alive, who's at least competent with their spear. And so a lot of times what happens in these battles is we may have a couple of very good experienced spearmen on our side, and it's this ongoing chess match or sort of sniper hunt where you're just basically trying to take out the other spearmen on the side so that once you can eliminate them, then it literally goes very quickly how fast you can take down everyone else. So if you can be that spearman who's very hard to kill, it's going to be very frustrating for the very good spearmen out there. So take a lot of pride in doing that and definitely work on that. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about with defense is using your range as a defense. I fought some spearmen this weekend who were far less experienced than I was. And I was very impressed with how good of a job they were doing of drawing me into other fighters. This is more of sort of an open resurrection field battle, and I would keep moving in on them, and every time I move in to take a shot, they would just take a few steps back. It's very easy defending against a spearman if you just take a few steps back every time they fire their spear. And again, I mean, there are things I could do to chase them down, but then I would have to run into the other fighters on their side. So definitely use that as a tool. That should not be the only tool you have. So that's a very good thing to use when you're fighting, but you also need to learn how to stand in there and defend without using your range. Because once you can do that, you can be a much more effective spearman. So if these people were able to deflect my shots and then hold me back, that would actually be better for them, and especially when you translate over to, say, like a bridge battle where there's really not a whole lot of places you can go, not a whole lot of places you can hide. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to use a good defensive stance in order to be able to stand in there and deflect things. It's something you should actually practice. Practice both things. I had a spearman a couple of weeks ago practice where we would literally have him stand. I would stand behind a line and he would stand out there with his spear tip on the ground, and his only defense was to back away every time I took a shot. And we tried to gauge so that he would back away just to the point where the spear tip would kiss him. And that's a good way to get very used to the range. I use that myself a lot. Again, this weekend, I had a knight who was throwing shots at me, and my defense was literally just leaning just out of his range. But you also want to be able to stand in there and defend. Now, at any level, it's very good to know your ability level versus the ability level of the person you're facing against. So basically, if they are of a higher ability level, backing out of the way, drawing them out, doing just enough to frustrate them, even though you may not get a kill on them, if you can draw out the fight, wear them out, and get them to have to keep throwing shots at you and wasting their shots, that's going to be very good for the battle. So that's something to be aware of. Okay, so having said all that, first thing we're going to talk about is foot position. Okay, I wish you could see my feet. I don't think you can from the camera. What I want to talk about is I noticed that I used to do this, and a lot of very new spearmen do this, is they naturally put their feet into a line, into a very straight line. Okay, and they're trying to, especially if they have, let's say, some polearm or greatsword background. So they're putting their feet in a straight line, and they're basically trying to cut off all the angles here. In fact, my 50 spear shots video, I actually put that in there, and I've actually since gone away from that. So what I like to do is to take the back foot and move it out about 4 to 6 inches off of that line. So you see when I move this foot out, it wasn't much. Here I am in a straight line. Now I'm out just a bit. So straight line, my shoulders are in a line. When I move out just a bit, puts my shoulders out at maybe about 20 or 30 degrees. And once you do that, I want you to try this. So the whole purpose of having this foot out in this position is so that you can dodge. For me, it's going to be to the left. For a lot of people, it's going to be to the right. I can dodge to this side. Okay? I can block these shots. If a shot comes into this side, I can move my spear over, and I can move my head just out of the way, and I put all of my weight shifts onto my left foot, or I would say 80% of my weight shifts onto my left foot, and I can bounce right back off. Okay, I can do that very quickly. I can bounce right off of that foot. Okay, so try that, and if your feet are in a line, you'll notice that you can't do that. All I did was move my foot back 4 inches, and I can't do that. So the only way to defend that is to now twist the body, throw the spear down, okay, and this puts you in a very awkward position. Okay, I have a couple fighters that have been doing this, and what I actually do, what I started doing is I'll come around to shoot for the side, and once they go here, I'll actually take a beat pause because they can't shoot their spear from here, so I'm completely protected. And then I wait until, usually what happens is they'll go like this, and then their spear will come back a little bit because they have to sort of throw themselves back on balance. What they're hoping to do is just do like one of these and they'll be fine. And as soon as I pause, it throws them off and it leaves them wide open. So that's the biggest weakness I see with keeping that in line. And also this spot right here becomes very hard to defend. Okay, we move that foot out 4 inches. You can do that all day. Try it yourself. You'll feel how much more effective that is than this. Another thing about your defense is, I call this the come at me bro position, which is think about trying to deflect the spears out in front of you. Okay, so when a spear shot comes in, I want to have that head start to deflect out here. Okay, rather than trying to cower and flinch and dodge around back in here, try getting that spear deflected out there. Again, it's going to take some practice, something to think about. But if it comes in from this side, boom, I want to catch it out there. If it comes in from this side, I want to catch it over there. I don't want to wait for it to come all the way in and then try to scoot around, dodge, flinch, cower, any of that stuff. Again, you might do okay with it early on, but the biggest problem with the cowering position, as soon as you go like this, you don't have an offense. So much like, say, a sword and shield, you like to be able to block something with your shield and then swing with your sword. Or with a polearm, you'd like to be able to step around and throw an attack as you block. We can't quite do that with a spear, but it's nice to know that you can block and then fire straight out of that position. Block, fire straight out of that position, rather than cower and then have to reset yourself to shoot. Okay, so it allows your offense, your counter shots to come that much more quickly. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is almost every new spearman I work with has the same problem, which they understand they want to hold the spear out in front of them. All right, if they're holding their spear off to the side, this is really bad. But most of them understand they want to have the spear out in front of them and pretty much on the center line here. Okay, now if you're holding the spear on the center line, you can get killed from either side. But it's not far to deflect it from one side or deflect it to the other side. Now, if my spear goes offline to here, then a shot can come around over here, but then it's a very quick move over to this side. And notice when I move the spear just a bit, and I move my body just a bit. So I'm moving my spear and my body. So it's about 50-50 for each. The problem that most people have is when I take my spear that's attacking them, I move it to the other side, they have the habit to go way out over here. I mean, pretty far out. Same thing to the other side. They come way over here. Okay, that's very bad, and that's very easy. If I can get somebody moving their spear across this way, it's very easy to feint to one side, move around to the other side, and get the kill. Also, when your spear's out here, you don't have a counter. So really what you're doing is you're just flinching and trying to slap this thing out of the way. And I've even seen some very experienced fighters who are picking up spear, who will do something similar, which is they'll try to hold my spear out this way, and when it moves to the other side, they'll try to hold it out over here. Don't get your spearing moving that much. Try to get your spear moving as little as possible. I put down the stick and pulled out the spear to actually show this. So what you want to be able to do, you're not going to be able to see from that camera angle, but when you look over your tip, okay, and then look at your opponent, you should be able to see to one side of them, you will see basically your tip to the outside of one shoulder, and then move the tip to the other side, and you're going to see the outside of the other shoulder. So I actually should be moving much more than this. Okay, that's about as much as I should be moving. And the only way to test that is really with a 9-foot spear. If you have something shorter, you're going to move it a lot more, and that's going to translate to a much bigger arc out on the spear. So that tip really shouldn't move more. Well, look at me. It really shouldn't move more than about that. And actually, you take it down to here, you're moving it maybe a foot, maybe 18 inches. You can test it in the mirror. You can test it on an opponent. You can maybe aim at a door, but I would maybe look at from the center of the door to the edge and just try to keep it within that short range. Don't go moving it across like this. Be very cognizant of that. It's going to take a lot of practice. Okay, so by keeping your spear moving minimally, that's going to be effective against 95% of the shots that are coming in at you. The part that's going to be difficult is when someone starts steering their spear around your shaft. Okay, and I'll talk about this on the offensive portion of this video. But they're going to start, instead of throwing it straight at you, they're going to start trying to pull that spear and throwing it around this way, and throwing it around this way. With those, you're going to want to move just a little bit further, and it's going to take practice. And what's going to happen is as you get more and more experience at this, you're going to start to see the mechanics of somebody who's throwing that shot. You're going to get used to people that have that shot in their repertoire. I actually have a mental note of people in my head that I fought at, that I only see at Penzic, and I know they have that shot, and I know how they set up that shot, and I know to look for it. The whole reason I'm bringing this up, though, is I don't want you to think that this minimal movement right here is 100% of the time effective against everything. Okay, this is your 95% position, and then 5% of the time you're going to have to throw a little bit further out, throw a little bit further out over that way. Okay, but we want to try to keep the movement as little as possible against the threat that you see. The other thing I want to talk about too is that this position is really geared toward a one-on-one spear fight. And I want to talk about the difference between a one-on-one spear fight and a melee. So there are lots of times in a melee where you do have a spear across from you, who more or less the two of you are in a spear duel. Okay, you can be in a woods battle. There could be some trees in the way. There could be some other shields around. Again, this weekend I was in a bridge battle where I was up on the left side. There was a person in the center. I did have to deal with a person in the center, but my biggest threat was the person directly across from me. The person directly across from me was 10 feet across from me. The person over to the right was probably 11 or 12 feet across from me. Okay, so I did have that to contend with, and there are certain things you deal with where this person throws a shot, and that's your chance to throw over here, or that person throws a shot, and that's your chance now to throw at this guy. But we do want to work on the sort of one-on-one fundamentals, and then try to translate that over to the melee. That's going to be beyond the scope of this video. You know, learning how to see a field better and not to get locked in on the person in front of you. But you do still need to have these fundamentals, because if you're up there doing all this stuff, none of that other stuff matters, because you're going to die very quickly. Okay, another thing about holding your position on the center line is you don't want to be so loose that if I smack your spear just flies off this way. Okay, your spear should not move at all. Now, a way to keep it from moving is to put a death grip on it and make sure that nobody can push you out of the way. Okay. Having a death grip is also very bad too. If you have a death grip on it and you start moving like this, that is very difficult to control as I start moving around. So if I find anybody that pushes very hard on my spear, I just throw a couple of feints at them and then I go right around. So no death grip. I recommend to hold it about as lightly as possible, but what you have to do is as soon as somebody starts putting pressure on your spear, you want to put just as much pressure against theirs to keep them from pushing you offline. Okay, so as they push on your spear, you tense up and you push back. As they release, okay, you release. Okay, you don't ever want to be in a position where you tense up and then if they dip their spear under your spear, that it pushes you over. Okay, you don't want to do that. As soon as they pull it over, you should be able to move right to the other position. Okay, so you want to be sort of light and stiff at the same time. Again, this is something you can practice. You can even practice without your armor on with another spearman and just practice. One person tries to knock you offline and you basically try to resist and keep it online. Again, the idea is just pretty much keep yourself online. If they get very aggressive, you can start doing things where, like, if they push very hard, then you can disengage and come around to the other side. Okay, arm position. Essentially, the front arm, I primarily have in a very relaxed position on my spear. I probably hold it however far apart that is. It looks like maybe about 2 feet. I hold it in a very relaxed position right here. Now, some people have argued that if you have your arm out straight, okay, you cut off a lot of angles. And this is true, and there are some times when I duel somebody, that is an option where I might get low and hold on to this position. My critique of this position is I personally don't think it's as effective once you start bringing in these angle shots over here. Okay, if somebody shoots from over here and I'm in a relaxed position, I feel like I can step out and move my spear over pretty quickly. When I have my arm out like this, I now have to do this. I now have to do this, come back over here, versus this I feel like I can do very quickly. Okay, again, experiment with that on your own. I'm not saying that one is necessarily better than the other, and I'm not saying to never use one or never use the other. I'm just giving you some ideas of the differences between the two different positions. Again, I prefer to have my arm a little bit closer, a little bit more control. Okay, offense. I'm going to talk about footwork. I'm just going to talk about a couple things on offense. One is going to be footwork. How do the feet move? So we've already talked about the position that the feet were in. So I'm going to talk about, I used to have 4 acceptable ways to move the feet. I've actually just recently added a 5th acceptable way. It's something I've been doing. I didn't realize I was doing it, and I realized it's a little bit different. Again, all of these methods are acceptable. You will definitely need to use one of the 2 lunge methods that I have. And then there are other methods to do if you're not in a lunge position that I think you can fire your spear off a little bit more quickly than using the lunge. So the very first easiest one that most people do is the lunge, which is very simply, you know, you're in your spear position, and then when you go to fire your spear, you step forward with your front foot, and then you pull it back. It's that basic. You step forward, you pull it back. When you do this, make sure everything moves at the same time. So you don't want to step forward. Usually I'll have like a little bit of a step first, and then everything fires out. What you don't want to do is step, shoot the hip, and then shoot the hand out. So everything goes together. So, and then as quickly as you can, obviously. Okay. So that's the lunge. The next one I want to talk about is what I call the split foot, which is you're going to do a little bit of hop. The front foot goes forward, the back foot goes back. This causes the hips to rotate. And this is something that's generally more effective if you're already in range, or maybe there's a pole arm or shield you're trying to get the shot off against, and you don't have to worry about so much stepping into range and out because you can get a little bit closer to them. And this is going to get the spear to fire a little bit more quickly than the lunge. And all it is that the feet basically split, do a little bit of a hop. Okay? You can practice that. If you like it, do it. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. The next one is what we call the kicker. It's very similar to an ice hockey shot, an ice hockey slap shot. So when a guy takes a slap shot, the back foot actually comes out behind him and shoots out just a bit to help a little bit with the balance. It helps throw your arm forward and it helps bring you back. So the way that looks is you're going to shoot and then foot comes out and then you come back. That's a little over exaggerated, but you're going to feel a little bit of a so that's acceptable. The fourth one I want to talk about is the kickback. I know that Duke Branos does this sometimes when he throws a long flat snap with sword and shield. I've been doing this for a couple years now, and it's kind of like the kick. It's kind of like a hybrid between the split foot and the kicker, and pretty much all you're doing is that the back foot is shooting back, and it sort of allows you to put your arm, your front arm, your shooting arm out in front of you, if you can just feel that. And this is what you're doing. You do a little bit of a hop, okay? So it's going to look more like, okay, so that foot shoots back as you lunge just a little forward, and you come back into position. And then the last one is sort of a hybrid between that and the lunge. And the way I think of this is it's sort of like I'm going to slide into the shot a bit. I'm just going to try to sort of reach out and touch somebody. And this foot's going to pop out just a little bit as I do that. Okay, so instead of pressing off the foot this way into a lunge, you're sort of sliding into it and you're hopping this back just a bit to sort of get your body to angle forward a little more quickly and to give yourself balance. And then the very last thing I want to talk about, so you take all these fundamentals. Certainly you want to practice your shots. I do feel that you should learn to fire one-handed, so you take your front hand off the spear just a bit. Okay, the pull cue is acceptable, but you can get a little bit more range and a little bit more speed by pulling the front hand off. Okay, at first it's probably going to come off and the spear tip's going to hit the ground and you're going to walk back and you're going to pick it up, but that's okay. And then in time you want to practice throwing it and then trying to catch in your hand. So you throw it, you bring the hand back to catch. The hand actually doesn't have to come very far off of it. You can sort of have the hand here, come back to catch. If you're not comfortable with that at first, do the pull cue technique, and then slowly you're going to start to find yourself at the very end. You pull the hand off, you pull it back. Okay, then over time you'll start pulling a little further, and then eventually you'll get a full extension to pull your hand back. Definitely practice that against a target. I have my own spear target right over there, right next to my flat screen TV, because I'm a genius. I haven't hit it yet. I have hit other things over there though. Anyway, so hit a spear target, maybe like a tire swing that's weighted down, a vine hanger from a tree, a narrow tree, something that's pretty stiff. It gives a little bit of a give. So I wouldn't do a brick wall. And my spear target, just basically take cardboard boxes, I tape a plastic lid to them, I stuff them full of any kind of garbage that doesn't smell. So like old carpet or cardboard works pretty well, old shoe boxes. So practice that. I put a piece of tape on the floor that's about 10 feet away from the target. And you always want to start from behind that tape, and then you want to attack and then come back to behind the tape. Some people I see when they fight, they get very intent on trying to hit the target, and they're like 8, 9 feet away from the target, and you're not practicing the motions that you're going to need to use. You need to reinforce the motions. If you're doing piano, you need to do your scales with proper technique. If you're doing spearing, you need to do your spearing with the proper technique. And you're never going to be in a situation where you can just stand there 8.5 feet away from somebody and just sit there and poke. Yeah, you can hit that target, but you're going to be dead. So finally, the last thing I want to talk about, and again, there's 70 spear tips I have online, but the last thing I want to talk about is start thinking about what I call steering your spear shots. So what that means is if you have a spear, a defensive, an opponent who's right here on this line, you can throw straight at him. A lot of your kills are going to be he fires, you defend, and then you fire as they're sort of reposting. Or you can sort of steer around their spear, okay, to either side. Okay, I do this one-handed, so I'll throw a shot that comes in like this. It doesn't have to come in that far, you know, even if you just go over a little bit or around this way. Just think about how to kind of get around that spear. Okay, that's the first thing I would start working on to get yourself from, you know, beginner spear to intermediate spear. Just start learning how to fire around that spear. Okay, and you practice that on your target. You practice that against the little sapling you're destroying outside. You practice that on your kid brother. Anyway, that's all that I have. I hope you found that useful.